Morning, Justin. Whoop. Morning, Justin. Whoop. Morning, Justin. Whoop. Morning, Justin.
That's impressive. It sounded like an actual broken record.
I tried.
Well done.
Hey.
It sounds like you must have heard broken records growing up or something.
Oh, very much so.
You really had that down.
Very much so. The only thing that was missing was the static.
Oh yeah. Yeah, the
Morning,
crackling.
Good morning, Justin. Good morning, Justin.
Yeah, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Yeah, so what are we talking about?
Well, you know what? We're talking about an important topic
That's
this
right.
morning.
One of the most important.
This is one of your, as I've come to know you, this is a Justinism.
Yeah.
I'm just not trying to be defensive or offensive even for that matter.
No
but
offense.
This
no
is
offense, Mark, but I'm not offended.
None taken. We're talking about a Justinism this morning.
Yeah.
Welcome to How I See It with me, Mark Pratt, and
Justin Sternberg. This is a podcast that works to counter cultural polarization through thoughtful conversations. And I call it the stick. And I've had some conversations recently with different people, and I just keep referencing this thing. And you know what? I've been workshopping it.
Have you?
Well, just in that I've been talking about it a lot.
I thought maybe you were developing a workshop around the stick that you were going
workshopping, to. That's like they talk about that like with comedians, like they're workshopping their material, trying to hone in on what works the most effective. I was about to say I've been workshopping a better name, but I haven't come up with a better name.
Okay.
So it's just the stick.
The stick. So tell me about the stick.
The
Dustin.
stick. All right. So I have this philosophy.
Okay.
Where every gift that we have, every talent, every whatever, tends to be tied on the other side. And I call it the stick, and I hold my hands up like I'm holding the stick, right?
Sure.
One end tends to be a positive thing in our life, and it's usually attached to another end of the stick, which tends to be a negative aspect of our life.
In your other hand.
In my other hand. But, it's, it's one stick.
Sure.
And the key
it's
component...
tied together.
Yes, exactly. The key component to this stick, which again, man, we need a better name than stick, Mark.
Well, I hate to say it, but it sounds like a continuum in some ways.
It does, yes, yes. Right. The key component to this stick, though, is that they are attached. There's no detaching it.
Sure.
And why that is so significant is that, and again, a lot of this comes from the background of being around recovery for many, many years. We come to find these negative characteristics, these negative traits that we have, right?
Sure.
And it becomes our goal to abolish them, completely gone out of our life. And, something like addiction, you truly want gone out of your life, right?
Sure.
So it's not necessarily about habits or kind of the surface things. It's more about the under the surface type things. So, and anxiety is an example of one. People pleasing,
Sure.
can be another example where we have this desire once we figure out that we have it to just get it gone, get it out of my life. I don't want to be that person anymore.
So, point of clarification, you were talking about our character defects.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So, are you saying addiction is a character defect or anxiety is a character defect?
That's a good question. Yeah, I want to be careful about how we define defect because part of this conversation in the stick is to recognize that some of these quote unquote defects are just part of who we are, and try as you may and do the work that you can. Some of these things are going to be they're built into your character, your personality. I would even say personality over character because there's this idea that everyone has these certain personality characteristics that kind of define who you are as a personality. And I also, the word define scares me too a little bit because, we never want to just say you can't change. And I guess I don't want to go so far as to say you can't change, but character is something that you build and you work on, right? So character defects are basically things that kind of undermine your character, right?
Okay. But
so yes,
would you
back to you.
Would you say they are still learned, or is it something that's innate, something that we're born with?
Yes, I think both.
Okay.
I think they can both happen.
Okay.
I'm not sure. I'm trying to again, this is very much workshopping this.
Well, that's why we're doing this. And I'm not trying to.
I think this is a mental exercise you can do where you can plug in any strength and any weakness. Okay.
Okay.
And see if it sticks. If it doesn't stick, don't use it. Use a different.
Don't use the stick. If it
don't
doesn't
use the
stick.
stick if it doesn't stick. You know, that reminds me of my favorite dad joke.
Yeah? What is your favorite dad joke?
That's terrible.
I know it.
What's brown and sticky?
A stick.
A stick, yes. All right, moving on. The point is, it's a mental model, right? It's something you can kind of plug things into and see, see how it calculates, right? And kind of see if the model fits. And then if so, you have a tool. A lot of celebrate recovery is built on different mental models, and they don't all apply to every single thing, every single situation.
Okay.
Right. So again, it's character defects, even that term, that's a key term in recovery, like trying to remove our character defects. But even that, in some cases, like I said, we need to have grace for ourselves and recognize that my tendency, for instance, towards depression or whatever, is I don't know if it's something I can eradicate from my life. So there needs to be some grace there to understand that quote unquote character defect may be one of those thorns in the flesh that Paul talked about, where you pray for it to go away, you do the work for it to go away, and it still kind of comes creeping around, and you can't quite identify the door it walks through, right? To get rid of that door or keep the door closed and locked or whatever. Yeah. So back to the stick thing.
Yeah. And I was thinking about it from a character. That's where I'm coming from, is a character defect dynamic. And I'm thinking about in that left hand, if we say that's where our negative character.
All right.
defect.
So my left hand is always the strength. So you gotta. I don't know why.
Okay.
But we gotta fix that.
Okay.
Right,
so your
start
right
over,
hand.
Mark. Right hand is it doesn't make sense, but I don't know
That's
why.
what
I'm always.
If it's your motto though, Justin.
Thank you.
The
Thank you.
right
I appreciate
hand
that.
is our negative character defects. Yes.
Yep. You got it.
So in my right hand, I have what I consider these negative character defects. And you alluded to depression, you alluded to anxiety, that kind of thing. And I'm thinking about that from a negative standpoint. And I'm still thinking, from my mind, I'm thinking, okay, is anxiety always a negative thing?
Yeah.
Or and I guess that's where
let's
recognizing it can be connected.
Yeah. Let me explain the mental model a little bit better.
Go for it.
Because it's not about first defining. It's more about defining kind of a neutral characteristic that you have. Okay, so let's name an example.
Sure.
Perfectionism.
Fair enough.
I'm a perfectionist, Mark.
Yes,
right?
you are.
All right, so let's take this and apply the stick mental model to it.
Sure.
What are some of the strengths and positives that come as a result of being a perfectionist? Go ahead. We're
Perfectionists
workshopping.
are great editors.
Okay.
In other words, they know how they just can. Mistakes come popping to the surface when their eyes pass over them. On the other end,
what are some other strengths? Is that the only strength?
Well, I think that's one of the greater
That's
strengths.
fine. Well, let's move on.
But
on
still,
the other end,
that desire for perfection can tend to make people critical of other people.
Which can, some of those knock-on effects is relational problems, right?
Sure.
Maybe you don't have many good relationships because.
And I think with that, in that not the middle, but with that critical part, I think it's easy to, and it's hard to encourage people. Let's put it that way. Kind of that 10 to 1 positive to negative interactions. I think, when I am critical or when I tend to be critical, it's harder to have the 10 positive, affirming conversations before I have the 1 negative. So I think it can lead to, a more critical spirit. I just tend to see, what's wrong with everything around me, or you for that matter.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And so what I like to do in these conversations is take this mental model, this stick, and beat them with it. Just kidding.
Beat them into submission until you change. This is how I see it.
No, that's
thoughtful
terrible.
Conversations and beat them with a stick.
If that's what it takes. All right, maybe I do like the name, the stick. It's multifaceted. No, so like we're talking. In some cases, we might be talking about someone's the strong side of their characteristic, and they might be feeling a little bit prideful about that. Kind of talking about, well, if this person would just understand, I'm a really good editor. Or another strength is that a lot of times a perfectionist produces really good work, so that they might produce laudable work, and they get lauded for that work often. And they might say, if I was so bad, why does everyone appreciate when I come in and do this, whatever, right?
Sure.
Or vice versa, like you maybe have felt the pain of the other side enough years in your life to now you're just tired of it. It's like you're only talking about the negative. I can't keep a relationship every time, we're on a date. I can't help but look at the spinach in her teeth or, whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Like, and you
this
just
sounded real familiar to you, Justin.
Uh-oh, I got spinach in my teeth. Well, the listeners can't hear my spinach, I hope. So.
It's all good.
So either direction, I like to take the stick concept and say, listen, with perfectionism, there's two sides to this stick.
Sure.
And the goal, I think, in our life is to find a balance because, and get this, I'm holding up my hands, right? Right and left, and I'm holding the stick in my hand, and I have it balanced evenly, right? Level, so to speak. And the goal is to understand that on the strength side, it's attached to the negative side. So when I'm tempted to feel prideful and like this is the ultimate thing, to recognize, yes, but it's connected to these other things. And you have to keep that balance in mind so that the pride and the tendency towards, saying like this is the ultimate is in check, to be able to say, it's not the ultimate. It's part of who I am. It's a gift that I have, but it's balanced by this other side.
Sure.
Right? And then on the other hand, so that's me holding my left hand higher up in the air saying, I'm really proud of this, right?
Sure.
So we want to bring that in balance to say, look, it comes with some humiliating sides that brings it kind of back down into balance, right?
Sure.
And then on the other side, let's say my right hand is higher up, right? I'm out of balance and I'm feeling the shame of the bad sides. And one thing to note here, is that it's very common to not see the attachment of the good and the bad. That's very common. And so what I was saying at the very beginning is this idea, I want to eradicate the bad, not recognizing the bad. But if you get rid of that, so this is where the conversation comes in when they're dwelling in that shame and the disappointment of these negative characteristics. I try to encourage them to say, look, this is a problem. You are right. But don't forget that it's attached to this other end.
Sure.
And because of this, right, you do great work at work. You do work that people look at and they think, wow, this is what I want my work to look like. Like you produce laudable work. And on top of that, when you step into a situation, maybe no one in the room can find this problem, but you're able to, and as a result, you can save them from a lot of heartache. Because of your abilities to find those flaws.
Sure.
And like being able to take that stick and bring that left side up and get it back into balance to say, now this negative side, that's something you're going to have to work on. This is something you have to keep balanced. But don't forget that it's attached to this good side.
Sure.
And you can't get rid of one without the other. You're just going to have to throw the stick away, which you can't do.
Sure.
Like this is part of your personality.
It's part of the stick.
It's part of the stick, and the stick is part of you.
I hear you.
You know?
And I'm not, I know you want to find another name for you, but when you were thinking of that balance, it does remind me of the yin yang type thing.
Yeah.
The black, the white, and that connectedness, that there is a balance to strengths and weaknesses, and we all have them. And I was thinking about it in that aspect of, you use the word shame, and that's typically one of those things, one of those words that I'm going to think about, whether I agree with it as far as applicability.
Yeah.
Because I think, we can tend to feel shame when I am bad.
Yeah.
Because of this. And I think sometimes we get it mixed up with guilt in a process that says, okay, I tend to do these things. And sometimes those things, specific things catch up with me. And then I do feel guilt about those specific things. You know what I'm saying? In that. And I think, whenever we tend to feel that guilt or shame, there is a part of us that, like you're saying, wants to get rid of that, kind of ship that off the cargo ship, just drop that in the ocean and sail away.
Yep.
But yet the stick basically brings that back to us in such a way that we're connected, and that ability to have awareness of my strength with my weakness is a healthy thing.
It is. Yeah, that's been my perception. And back to the shame and guilt thing, one thing that you said before that I think is the idea of shame is I am bad, right? Where the idea of guilt is I do bad, right? That was bad, that thing is bad, versus an identification thing. Shame often takes the things that I do bad and says, but you're bad. And,
exactly.
Yeah, so again, I don't, when I say bring those things in balance, I certainly don't mean it's okay to continue those flaws and, write it off as acceptable. I think we're meant to wrestle with those things, contend with them and continue to find tools and resources to address those things in a recognition that says, this is part of who I am. Therefore, I need these tools, these plans, this toolkit or whatever to help work through some of those negative tendencies. Because without that plan, that stick will get out of balance, right?
Yeah.
And then also this idea of shoving the stuff off the ship, right?
Yeah.
The problem again with that, if you could do that, is you're likely now untethered in the strength. And I mean, that sounds great. Like, so only have the good, right? But I just don't think it matches with the reality, which is we need that humility to keep it in balance. And that's what gives us the gravitas with our strengths to be able to say, it's a heavy responsibility to carry this strength, right? Because it comes with this as well. And I don't know, I think that gives it more humanity. It gives it, I honestly don't know that there is such a thing as a perfect strength that has no, like a characteristic that isn't somehow attached to the other end of the spectrum, as you said, right? The continuum.
So as you're workshopping this stick, okay, help me understand where growth comes into your model.
For me, growth is about the balance. It's about, hey, you're holding that negative end of the stick up way too much, and this is what you're beating yourself with. This is what you're hurting other people with. Like, it is out of balance. And the goal would be to, all right, let's chill out and recognize you're just human. This is something you can work on. But hey, let's also balance it with the fact that this also comes with this strength, like we talked about earlier. So for me, growth is about learning to recognize that pattern and see when they're attached and be able to come back to that balance. Continue to, the rest of your life, keep that in balance as much as possible, and vice versa. Like, growth is being able to say, hey, I know you're super proud of the fact that you can criticize everybody and you can find all the flaws, and that you're really proud of that. Let's chill on that, because here's the thing. Look at the wreckage behind you, right? As a result of this quote unquote strength, right? Like, and be able to
wreckage of relationships
relationships, and even opportunities, because they're like, I see the gifts there, but I don't want the end of the stick that hurts me. I just want, if I could have just the good end, I'd take it.
So for you, the stick becomes that ability to recognize that I can be prideful and about the things that I've accomplished, but that still can be a negative dynamic when I go too far in that direction.
Yeah. Right. That's why it's about balance. Holding that stick in. And
then balance. I think as from our human dynamic, we only want to focus on that one end. that we see as our strength. And it does take relationship to kind of help us recognize. So the stick is kind of a relational dynamic where I'm open to the fact that I'm connected, but yet I also have people to help me identify what's in my right hand.
And speaking of these people,
they have sticks too.
You know where this happens the most often is marriage, because in the dating side of things, you get to see a lot of that left hand, right? A lot of those strengths.
Sure.
And we're pretty good about bringing our best foot forward and kind of leaving the baggage at the door when we leave to get in there, go on our date, right?
Sure.
In marriage, the rest shows up. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, and you hear, Mark, you hear this in counseling all the time, I'm sure. I know I've heard it many, many times. I can't stand that he does X. And X is the other end of the stick that got them into this relationship in the first place. It's the thing that made them go, this guy is amazing. Right?
No,
Isn't that so common where it's like, yes, but you're not realizing that that's connected. Sure. And what made you love him is now the thing that makes you detest him. Yeah. And they're attached. You don't get one without the other. Is that fair?
Well, that's very fair. At that moment when I'm hearing that negative cycle, I'll not immediately, but routinely, I'll shift it to say, okay, what drew you to them in the beginning? Yeah. And that's when you'll see that other side of the stick. You
see them light up, and as they talk about.
Oh, I remember, this and that, and there's a multitude of things. Most cases, if you hear that part, well, I'm not sure what attracted me to him in the first place. Then we still got to work on that next. But when you're able to kind of make that shift, yes, that is a part of the stick of relationship. Yeah. Is that we have these strengths that we bring in, and as you say, in dating, we tend to lead with those and minimize, and those, and so often that dynamic of red
in dating,
flags.
It's like we're jousting with the stick, and the left hand's forward, and you, sure, and then. This analogy, it just goes so well.
Yes, I can see that you have put a lot of thought into this stick. It's the hammer. It's the hammer.
That's right. I tend to stretch analogies as far as they can possibly go. So
that's fair enough.
No, but I was just thinking about, like, in marriage, for instance, some examples would be like, my husband, he never plans anything. He doesn't. I always have to take the initiative and figure out what we're doing, what restaurant we're going to, or whatever. And what was it that attracted you when you were dating? Oh, he was so spontaneous. Sure. And it's like that's a perfect example, right? Sure. Of like, well, when there's meant to be a construct, maybe that's a weakness, but when there's room for spontaneity, that's the strength, right? Sure. Or
stability. Versus, you can see how that continuum is there. Well, we never do anything spontaneous. Yeah. Well, but I love the fact that he was so stable, because I was so emotional at that point, and he was just a source of stability, or vice versa. She was, and he, that's
And that, a good example of that with me and Megan is like, she's really good at planning and orchestrating things. So like,
sure,
Saturday we're going to go to Wilmington. We're going to, go to Trader Joe's. We're going to make different stops or whatever. And she'll have the route planned in her head, and, this whole thing, like she just kind of maps it out. And so much of our life, I love that about her.
Sure.
Like, she knows exactly where their kids are going to be, when they're going to be, when I need to be there to pick them up, all this. She has this whole thing mapped out in her head.
Sure.
And to be honest, it relieves a lot of that need in my mind, because I'm she's got it figured out. I'll just go where she tells me to go. But then, of course, we go to Wilmington. I'm like, oh, hey, we should go do X. Yeah. The spontaneous thing is, you see this look on her face, like,
we didn't put that in the schedule.
Yeah. And I'm like, come on, and then I get offended, right? Like, you just never, want to do something spontaneous and fun. And it's like, but I'm reaping the benefits of her strengths in this most of my life.
Sure.
And then, and this is something, as you can tell, I've learned, like, this is a stick thing where the negative side that bothers me sometimes, I have to recognize is as far as balance goes in our relationship, I reap the rewards of the strengths way more than I deal with the quote unquote negatives of,
Sure.
well, we don't get to do the spontaneous thing, or if we
never get to do what I want to do,
or we can. Here's the thing:
Sure.
she will allow it. She's not a jerk,
Sure,
but she's not going to have the same excitement that I would have and that I would want to see. Right? It's going to be like, okay, we can do it, but it's against my plan, you know?
Yeah, and I think that even ties in with the growth dynamic. As you have shifted, you value who she is, and yet you're able to say now in your mind versus, you know, years ago, you're able to say, oh, Wilmington on Saturday.
Yeah.
I was thinking about, what are your thoughts on that?
Yep.
Can we add that to, and, you know, and I think you've probably learned to be more, what's the one?
Planny.
You think ahead?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to go with planny.
Planny. That's a good word. I'm good with it. But yeah, you tend to think proactive. That's the word I was looking for. You tend to be more proactive in your ability to say, hey, what about this?
Yes.
Because it's not just flying by the seat of your pants anymore. And, you know, which would tend to be a reactive thing between the two of you years ago.
Yep.
Because, and then of course you would have your own aspect of that cycle when you didn't get your way.
Yep.
Now you're able to say, okay, well, maybe next time.
Yeah.
You know, we're going, it's not like we don't need the food from Trader Joe's, but next time, if we can, let's just think about this and add that to our day.
Yeah.
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 And I think,
or even asking for room, right? Is acceptable too. Hey, when we go to Wilmington, let's not, you know, maybe plan the whole thing. Like, let's leave some room for, I might want to stop here. I'm not sure yet, but if there could be some room, she's great at that too. It's, you know, and I've also, you know, in terms of growth, recognizing like, if I don't do that, well, that's on me. I had an opportunity to have that conversation, and growth on her side is she's definitely like through the years understood that about herself and said, and she's very flexible. Like I said, she's not a jerk. She'll totally do it.
Sure.
Now I just want her to tell her face that she wants to do it.
Hashtag tell your face. I like that. Yeah.
No, that's a joke. But yeah, you get the idea. It's like sometimes I want more out of her than she can even give, you know, because I'm asking a lot of her in terms of, you know, her personality.
And you will tend to see that through her body language at times. And some of that is just that reactionary feeling that we sometimes have when our mind is suddenly thinking, oh, not again. And our face tends to betray that at times.
Yeah. But the patterns, you know.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. Another personal area that I think I've talked about approval addiction.
Sure.
This idea that like I need approval in order, I need that next hit, right, of approval. And so I've applied the stick to this too, and to just understand that desire for approval allows me to be really good in a social situation. Like I can step into a situation and I can make someone feel happy. You know, I can find the person who maybe looks like, you know, they're, you know, on their own or whatever, and I can approach them and have a conversation. And like, I've learned how to get people to quote unquote like me, through like, I don't know, it's hard to explain, like basically talking to them and encouraging, you know, asking about their stuff, their life, and recognizing, you know, over the years, like what gets someone to like you is you liking them, you know, and like, but so that's the strength. There's some strength there. And then the other thing is it kind of like the perfectionist, it allows me to produce really good work because I often will, that's like I want to produce good work inherently. Like I desire that. But when I get the approval, it's like a stamp of yes, you know, this is good work. Let's do it again.
It energizes you.
Yeah, exactly. So I tend to produce good work, right? So those are some of the strengths. Now, I think you can naturally intuit some of those weaknesses of like, sometimes the work's not enough. I also need the approval, and then it's like, you know, I get a little mopey or whatever. Or like, you know, in terms of that relational thing, it's like, okay, that relationship is matured enough to where my little party tricks, right? Now it's just about real relationship, and it's like, I don't think I impressed this person anymore. I don't have anything else to offer.
Sure.
And that can be like a bummer for me. Like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know. So again,
I don't
that
have any more
stick.
magic tricks left.
Yeah, exactly. And the stick is putting those things in balance to say, hey, now we have a real relationship, and I don't have to do party tricks every time I see this person. Sometimes I can just be real, and that's a good thing. And then vice versa, like recognizing, sometimes that good work, everyone's applauding it, but honestly, that's partly why I did it. So just recognizing, like, that's not a good thing. I'm glad I produced this work. I'm not glad that, part of the reason and the motivation was to get this applause, and it it's just a balance.
Sure.
I don't mean to drag that strength so far down that there's now shame, but just a balance to go, it's all right.
Sure. Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does make sense. And I think like you're saying, we need to be aware of the balance, because most of us have a strength, but there is another side, if I may, to that, that strength that I need to have an awareness of, in such a way that says, okay, yeah, it's not just that I'm this, because we can think about even that like people pleasing, you call it
approval
addiction. Yeah. It's like that other side would be the inability to say no to people.
Yes, that too. Yep.
Because I'm so consumed at times with pleasing
which
people.
makes you a good servant.
Sure.
But makes you a slave to yes.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's it's difficult, and at times it can be difficult to be honest.
Yep.
Because of the fact that, sometimes I need to be able to say no. And sometimes, I need to be able to say hard things to people in a way that is still truthful and kind, that kind of thing. Yeah. So, I appreciate your sharing from that perspective. And I think so often, even in who we are, and initially I was thinking, I think we all have strengths and we have weaknesses, and being able to tie those two together, I think, is helpful versus, I think sometimes I can think about it. I guess for me personally, I may be just good at one thing. Like I may be able to use my hands, but I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a business person. You follow me? And I the stick analogy I like because, excuse me, in some ways I need to recognize those two aren't stuck together. You follow me? So I can still work.
Oh yeah.
So we want to, I think if I'm hearing you correctly, we want to recognize that one thing, typically like pride, typically has a stick at the other end. You follow me? But it doesn't mean that just because it doesn't mean that everything is connected to everything. Sometimes go ahead. I'll let you, I can tell you're understanding where I'm coming from maybe better than I'm communicating.
Yeah. They're not always, you can't always draw a clear connection between two traits. I think that's part of what you're saying. And I don't think you should force it, but I do think you can learn to learn this. You can learn this mental model and apply it. And like I said, if it sticks, it sticks. I think the two ends probably is like you have the thing in the middle that this is the stick. The two ends is pride and shame.
Sure.
Right. So I think that's probably what I would say to keep in balance. And but yeah, I mean, even with you and being good with your hand, we joked and talked about this a lot on this podcast, like the technical side. You make jokes about not being good at that, but at the same time, trying to keep that in balance and say, I can get better at this. And you've mentioned that several times, and and it's recognizing that, like, I'm really good with my hands, which comes at the expense of not really caring about this computer stuff, but and whatever. But trying to keep that in balance to say, I feel like that's a perfect example in terms of your side and what you just brought up.
You connected the stick. Nice job. You made those two things into a stick.
Yeah.
But I'm hearing where you're coming from.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you can't take two distinct sticks and then attach them. So
I agree.
Being good at business and being good with your hands, maybe not, but being good at tech versus being good with your hands, I can see how those are kind of two ends of a stick.
Yes.
But like you said, it doesn't mean you can't get better, but it's pretty likely at this point in your life, you're never going to be like
Sure.
someone who sits, like works at a computer.
Likely
There's
not.
nothing inside you that has any inkling that would be a direction you'd want to go,
Sure.
right? Like I think I
Based
know
on
that.
a desire, even at this point.
That's what I mean. Yeah. So I
agree.
think that's safe to put it on the same stick versus like what you're saying. Maybe you don't feel the same way about being good at business.
Sure.
That's something I think, based on what you're just saying right now, you do have a desire to do and do see that you could get better at it.
Sure.
And it's not necessarily, I'm good at my hands, therefore I can't be good at business.
Yeah.
Right?
Thinking of your stick, though, when I realize you mentioned CR at the beginning, but for you, how old were you basically when you kind of gravitated to the stick model? When was that, in that process for you? Because I'm thinking about certain ages, looking back in my own life, early on, I might not have been able to even acknowledge there is a stick.
Yeah. Yeah.
So how did the stick process come about for you, if I may ask?
Like I said, I've been workshopping it for a while. So.
Yeah, but I mean, was there a specific?
I think a lot of the Celebrate Recovery material itself is about finding and addressing character defects, but there's also a lot of things in the material about talking about our strengths and what areas are you good at, because as you know, spiritual inventory is, step 5 is kind of right in the middle. Step 4 is creating your inventory, and the whole, what we talk about so often about inventory is keep it balanced. Exactly. Yeah. And so what I started, that I think at some point in this, I've been doing Celebrate Recovery for, I started in it 14 years ago. So
Sure.
off and on, been involved with it for 14 years. And so somewhere in there, it started to go, oh, wait a second, they're connected, you know? And then even like applying that to myself and seeing how it was connected, and then starting to hear it around the room. Because, you go around the room, people answer their questions, and I started to go, oh,
Yeah.
that person's thing is connected too. And oh, that person's connected. And they're feeling a lot of shame, but they don't realize they have this other side, or vice versa. Like, oh, he's really proud of that thing, but he doesn't realize it comes, like.
Yeah.
And,
No, I hear you.
So yeah, I want to say, let's go with 6 years.
Yeah. And it's interesting that as you were discussing that and talking about it, when I think of old school balance, I imagine those two, like the justice weight system.
Yep.
You know what I think?
Yeah.
Because a balance does combine, something on this side, my right side, with something on my left side, and we kind of, view that. So it's interesting, that word itself as an origin of, two things being connected in a way that weighs them against the other.
Yep.
Yeah.
The other thing, because you were moving your hands up and down.
Sure.
And what made me think of is the stick on a tightrope.
There you go.
Right?
I hear you.
And that's kind of what I'm talking about, like trying to keep the stick in balance. And
if you're on the tightrope.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, the tightrope,
No, I'm just thinking about it. What's that thing they use? They don't use it a stick. What's that thing a person carries across the tightrope?
I don't know. They're all sticks to me, Mark. If I had a better name, don't you think we would have started with that? A baton.
Yeah, it could be. Could be. But either way.
I bet you someone knows the name of the stick that a tightrope person carries.
Could be a balance.
Balance stick? Or just the word?
Yeah, balance. Could be. I don't know.
I don't know either.
But yeah.
So that's the stick. What do you think?
I like it.
Does it work?
Yeah. No, I appreciate you sharing from that perspective.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and the other thing I was going to say is, the better you can get at identifying the stick, the more empathy you can have for others, the more grace for others and yourself, to be able to kind of balance those things. And again, when someone is exhibiting weaknesses that bother you, to go, but what does this mean? And be able to do that. Or when you're trying to encourage others, right? Like, depending on the environments you're in, someone might be really upset about some characteristics of theirs, and be able to encourage them and say, yeah, but remember this too, and again, doing that back to yourself, to say, I'm so frustrated, I did this again, and to, keep those things in. I think the concept of this balance thing is really healthy for anybody. If the stick helps you remember that, and you can start seeing the stick, I think that can help keep things in balance a little bit.
No doubt. And as you were describing that, even the servant leadership is I think an area where a person recognizes they have abilities to lead, but they don't have to anymore. You know, and I think so often that comes with time and my ability to say, okay, yeah, I can lead, but at the same time, I can help others become good leaders if I pull back and I'm willing to just say, hey, you know, let me help you in that process. It's just one of those thoughts that come to mind. But I think, yeah. So thanks for sharing, Justin.
Yeah. Thanks for letting me talk about the stick.
Not a problem at all. You want to close us?
That's how we see it.
There you go.
Doesn't sound as good coming from you. You do it. You do it.
This is how I see it.
Nailed it. Hey, thank you for listening to our podcast. If you like how I see it, please do all the things that podcasts tell you to do. Subscribe, rate, review, follow us, and or talk nicely about us on social media. If you want to reach out, the email is us@howiseeit.click. Yep, I said .click, as in .click. Please tell your friends about this show, and we'll see you on the next one.